That's right. It's Fantasy Football Live. We are here for you for week 2. Don't worry. You got all the week 1 jitters out. You didn't know what you were doing week 1. That's okay. There was a lot of unproven everything. You threw spaghetti against a wall. Week 2, it all turns into absolute magic, and we're going to be here for you all the way up to kickoff to get you ready. I'm Jason Fitz. I'm sitting with Matt Harmon, Chris Allen, Justin Boone, some of the best experts in all the land. Harmon, you got the week 1 jitters out. How do we feel about week 2? You feel like you're just ready to come in and globally dominate?
Definitely not. I'm ready to realize that everything we saw in week 1 was a mirage, where the things we overreacted to, the things we underreacted to. Week 2 is almost just as confusing as week 1, because even if we think we have clarity on certain things, this slate of games is completely ready to tear that apart.
Chris, how many weeks into the season until you actually take a sigh of relief and be like, yeah, no, I got this. I know where we are now?
14. I think that's how many I need in order to get to that point. Because no, I think Matt's point is poignant in the sense that we don't know if we can trust all the stuff that we got out of week 1. So I'm going to need at least 2 to 3 more data points of information from each of these teams and the skill players associated with them for me to have some level of confidence that each week as we go through this and trying to analyze and project what's going to happen every Sunday, that we're going to have at least some level of confidence behind some of those takes. So I need a few more weeks, but to Matt's point, let's see how much we can course correct from all the stuff we saw last week. And then we'll just come back next Sunday and be like, well, all that stuff, I mean, that was just, we only have 2 data points. Now we're ready to go after this.
That's fact. Boone, I was thinking of you Sunday night. How many boxes of Flutie Flakes does one celebrate with after that Sunday night win? The world needs to know.
Oh, I mean, I wanted to run through the neighborhood just throwing Flutie Flakes on every porch. Like, it was one of the best feelings I've had in a regular season game ever. Super, super exciting. Ready to see them do it again against the Jets this week. The Bills' schedule gets a lot easier from here on out after that Ravens game. So, yeah, it's a great start to the season. A great start to the season being with you guys again.
That's why he's an adult. He didn't run through and put them on every porch. I would have. Okay, we're going to be here for the next 90 minutes. We're going to get you caught up on everything you need to know. Use the hashtag AskFFL. You know the drill. Drop some comments in the YouTube chat. We will get those in throughout the course of the show. But let's get to what you're worried about right now. The inactives list have been announced. Some key names everybody's got their eyes on. Juwan Jennings will be active. Quentin Judkins will be active. You see it there. I think we expected this. Xavier Worthy out. Dallas Goedert out. We've also got some Monday night action that you need to keep an eye on now, simply because it will impact what we've got coming through the rest of the week. Monday night, Chris Godwin out. Christian Kirk out. Brock Bowers listed as questionable. Let's start there real quick. And Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this. What's everybody supposed to do today when you're sitting around and you got Brock on your fantasy lineup, but he's not playing until 10 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night? How do you handle it?
So hopefully folks were able to go out on the waiver wire and pick up some of the tight ends that were, let's say, popular after the week 1 games. We're talking about Harold Fannin Jr., potentially Juwan Johnson from the Saints, those types of guys that were out there running routes, catching passes for their specific offenses. But let's say after the waiver wire we're running, and now that we don't know how things are going to shake out for Monday night, check and see if Michael Mayer is still sitting out there on your waiver wire. Tight end out of Notre Dame, let's see if he might be able to be the guy that allows you to take as much time running up essentially until kickoff for the Raiders. And if you have Bowers in your lineup, Michael Mayers, if he's out, if Bowers is out, slide Michael Mayers into the lineup. And if Bowers winds up playing, you already know you have a backup option. So that'd be how I try and approach it, to see if Michael Mayers is out there on your waiver wire.
Harmon, take a look at Judkins for me. 62% rostered in Yahoo leagues. Probably not going to start this week with limited role. What are you looking for there?
Honestly, just seeing how he looks. This is a guy who did not have a training camp, right? He never played with the team. Like, how much is he going to be used? How much does he know just like the run concepts they're going to be using there? And not to mention too, like, Dylan Sampson, the fellow rookie running back, played really well, especially in a passing down role. So there's a chance. I know people are very excited about Quentin Judkins. There's a chance that, like, he becomes the early down banger on an offense that certainly played well in week 1. Like, I think the Browns were surprisingly competitive in that game, but this is a different beast going against the Baltimore defense. They've got Green Bay coming up on the schedule. Like, it's not going to be an easy slate of offenses here for the Browns. And if we're talking about just an early down banger who's not even getting all of those snaps to himself because he's splitting with Dylan Sampson, that's going to be a tough player to throw in your fantasy lineup with a lot of confidence, unless he just absolutely balls out in his first showing, which I'm a little bit skeptical of that just because of the time missed.
We got a lot to get into. Let's start with some top fantasy storylines for week 2. We like to give you some of the things we have our eyes on every single week. Justin Boone, you get first crack at this one. What's your favorite fantasy storyline?
Man, Harmon and I talked about this the other day, but revenge is on the menu again this week, right? We saw what happened last week when Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields squared off and got to go against their old teams, and it definitely mattered. Like, they admitted after the game, you could see it on their faces out there. It mattered. This week, we get a bunch more. We get Ben Johnston going up against the Lions, his old squad. And, what has he been planning for them? You can't tell me that he hasn't been sitting there all offseason since he got that job, coming up with plays that he could use against his old squad. We got DK Metcalf facing the Seahawks. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be willing to help out his new teammate and let him get that feeling of beating his old team as well? It was so important to Rodgers. Will it be just as important to him to get that for DK? And then we have the Chiefs after losing in the Super Bowl to the Eagles. They get a potential revenge game here, though it's going to be very difficult. I mean, we saw in the inactives, Xavier Worthy out. We know Rashee Rice isn't there. They got some injuries and some issues in that receiving core that I think is going to make it very, very tough for the Chiefs to come out on top in that game. But I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more later.
All right, Harmon, give me your top fantasy storyline for week 2.
Yeah, I talked about at the top, like sometimes we overreact to what we see in week 1. What I don't think is an overreaction is that the Los Angeles Chargers are a pass-first team. And that is despite the fact that the broadcast crew that was calling that game could not believe it. Every single time they dropped back passes, like, what are the Chargers throwing the ball again? Yeah, this Chargers team this is why it's not an overreaction, because this is who they started to show that they were last season. The Chargers, after their week 5 bye last year, were second in neutral pass rate. They know what they have in Justin Herbert. And last year, he wasn't even fully healthy. He was coming back from plantar fasciitis. He was coming back from a high ankle sprain. He's dealing with a lot last season, especially early. But the more he got healthy, the more that Ladd McConkey emerged in this offense, the more they leaned into the passing game. Like, people still talk about the Chargers as if they're this like boomer ball run heavy outfit, but they've shown us for a while now and doubled down on it last week with 14 first down passes for Justin Herbert that they want to be a pass first team. So I think where the rubber meets the road here is that Herbert is a top 10 fantasy quarterback, no question to me. And the receivers, like, you can start viably all 3 of these guys in Ladd McConkey, obviously, Keenan Allen as a high floor receptions guy, and even Quentin Johnston is going to be volatile. But if the coaching staff is willing to live with that volatility, I think you should too if you need like a wide receiver 3, kind of a Hail Mary type of play in your fantasy lineup.
Yeah, it's a favorable matchup this weekend, too, against that secondary for the Raiders.
Yes,
Says the guy wearing a Raiders shirt. I will admit all of this. Okay, I'll get to my top fantasy storyline for week 2. And, gentlemen, it's only week 1 in the books, but boy, am I taking a victory lap because, A, I'm not an adult. B, I don't believe in sportsmanship. And C, most importantly, I was right last week. We were asked for bold predictions at the end of the show. Now, I have been destroyed on Inside Coverage and Yahoo Sports Daily, which you can listen to from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. every day on yahoosports.tv. For my take that Daniel Jones is going to be the comeback player of the year and the Colts are going to win the division. I don't know. I told y'all last week, bold takes, that Tyler Warren was going to be a top 3 tight end in fantasy over the course of the weekend. Sure feeling pretty good about all these Colts takes I've been railing off. Now, I know it's only 1 week, but the good news is I still think the Colts have a pretty favorable matchup going into this week. So, still think we're going to see more of it. Do I believe that the Colts are on the same level as, let's say, a team like the Bills or the Chiefs, even 0-1, or the Chargers? No, I just believe the Colts are a lot better than people expect, and I still think that there's a lot of value in this offense because I trust Shane Steichen. We give benefit of the doubt to a lot of different coaches in the NFL. I think Shane Steichen, even though it's 9-8 and 8-9 that he's had in his first 2 years, when you look at the quarterbacks he's had, I'm not at all surprised to see who I called the Wish version of Josh Allen, or the Temu version, the generic brand version of it, is going to end up in this course of the season being the Colts offense. So I like Daniel Jones a lot this year. That's my victory lap. Chris, take us back to professionalism. Give us your top fantasy storyline for week 2.
Well, I don't know if I can take us back to professionalism because given the team that the Colts just lit up just this last week, I don't know if that's possible. What is going on down in Miami, fellas? When we saw Tua Tagovailoa come into week 1 and look like the quarterback that nobody really wanted to start for the Dolphins. I mean, just last season, we saw him have at least a 2.29 EPA per dropback on some of his throws because he was firing that football out there from a pass game standpoint at one of the fastest rates. And so seeing him be more efficient while actually having that almost blind faith in the offense, that where he would have that quick trigger, toss the ball downfield to both Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. We didn't see that last week. And so my hope is that part of the reason for that is DC Luanarumo, my guy from past seasons being with the Bengals, still has part of his fastball and being able to hold back or maybe make Tua second guess his first read. And that's why we saw him have more of that slower time to throw, 2.66 average time to throw just in week 1. That's where some of that, I guess, lack of faith in the offense and what he was seeing downfield was part of it. So that's my one concern. My second concern is also the passing game itself. That passing game distribution used to be just Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and of course having both Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith come into the picture last year. We can add in a couple more of those guys. We saw Tanner Connor getting mixed in last week, Malik Washington also as well. What is this pass game distribution going to look like moving forward? So that's my concern for them. Hopefully against the Patriots, especially with Christian Gonzalez out this week, we might see things get back to what we expected, but also with Austin Jackson out, not being able to protect the blind side for Tua. I don't know. Something's got to give, fellas, and I don't know what's going to happen. So that heat down in Miami, it might not just be because of the temperature, fellas.
All right, Justin Boone is our resident Batman for rankings. We all know that. And the bat signal in this case is a big old Buffalo Bill. It's in the sky. That means he needs to go to the Bat Cave to work on his rankings to get you the final tweaks in before kickoff. I know you need him. He knows you need him. He'll be back to break it all down shortly. Now, let's get to some last-minute pickups. Yeah, there's still a chance to actually grab some of these guys off the wire and play them right now. So, Matt, give me somebody that right now is out there as a last-minute pickup for you that you like.
Yeah, I'll talk about New England Patriots wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, who right now is still just 28% rostered after having a big week 1. I will admit that over the course of the season, I am skeptical that he can keep up the level of production that we saw in week 1. Not so much because I think he is a bad player or anything like that. It's just the way that he's used in this offense. I charted him with 95% of his snaps on the line of scrimmage, 36% go route rate. So just one of those like pure vertical X receivers. You need the right matchup to hit those every week, like we saw last week with the against your Raiders, Fitz. Not a good secondary, as you admitted. Still, this is a guy who's running around on 83% of the dropbacks, 40% of the air yards. If you're looking for that like high ceiling wide receiver 4 like flex play, I do think he is definitely viable because once again, let's keep picking on the Dolphins here. For as much of the heat Chris gave that offense, that secondary might be the worst unit on the team. So I am comfortable throwing Kayshon Boutte here out and chasing that ceiling in week 2, even if I'm skeptical he can hit it over the course of the season.
I want to petition to have that pronunciation changed to Boutte. Yahoo Fantasy is asking in the chat, Calvin Austin or Boutte? Boutte.
I will definitely attack I know you're asking me. I'm definitely going to attack I'm giving it some thought, Fitz. Don't you want me to give a thoughtful response to the people here? I will attack the weaker secondary here. Miami is definitely a much lower ranked unit than the Seattle Seahawks. I think that defense is going to be pretty good over the course of the season. So give me the guy that's the vertical player against a bad defense.
All right, we'll give you more time to think of another name. Chris Allen, in the meantime, give me somebody that is on your last-minute pickups.
So I was talking about him a bit earlier because if you're struggling at the tight end position, let's also look to Juwan Johnson for the Saints. And now, Harmon, you and I talked about the Saints offense last week on the recap show. 46 attempts for Spencer Rattler. It's kind of a choice from Kellen Moore to have Spencer Rattler come out firing, but that did benefit a guy like Juwan Johnson. 100% route rate for the veteran tight end. 26.8% target share, 11 targets. That's the third time that the veteran tight end has gotten into the double digits from a target rate standpoint. And then also 30% of the team's air yards. So now Johnson, while he did have that number of targets in week 1, I think it came at the expense of Alvin Kamara, just 2 targets for the PPR monster running back. So let's see if things continue to shake out that Johnson is the beneficiary of this high target rate for the Saints offense. But still, if you are looking for a tight end to stash and have as a Brock Bowers backup or any of the tight ends that you draft, let's say if you have Mark Andrews on your roster, you're looking for somebody that might produce a bit more, having Juwan Johnson as the guy that you can pick up as the last minute potential with tight end viability for week 2, Juwan Johnson should be your guy.
All right, Harmon, give me one more player that you got out there for a last minute pickup could be available for people.
Look, there's no question that Week 2's matchup against the Baltimore Ravens is not as good as the Week 1 matchup for my guy Cedric Tillman against the Bengals defense in Week 1. Definitely just a totally different beast here. That being said, he is still only 39% rostered, and I don't know what Yahoo leagues are doing right now. Like, the people are asleep at the wheel. I said this last week. I'm going to double down on it in this section here. This guy has been just as productive, if not more productive. He does have more fantasy points than Jerry Jeudy in the span of games that they have both been healthy since Amari Cooper has been traded. Last week, he ran an exact equal amount of routes as Jerry Jeudy, so I think these guys should be ranked like neck and neck. I was also really encouraged with Cedric Tillman's usage in Week 1 because he got more snaps off the line of scrimmage, more use in motion as the flanker, which fits really well for some of those big in-breakers that he runs well and Joe Flacco wants to play. So I'm not rushing out to play Tillman like I was in Week 1 just because of this matchup, but if you need help at wide receiver, you've got some injuries, I definitely think this guy is still viable based on how much he is playing and how good he is at the game.
I am looking down here at the YouTube chat, and it is firing on all cylinders. So let's get some of these in. Check the chat. We'll get some of your questions in. We're going to do this throughout the course of the show. Remember, we're with you all the way to 1 p.m. K. Will says, I'm a fan of Mims being a big play and returns point racker. Harmon, thoughts on Mims?
Yeah, still not like a real wide receiver. That's the problem. I can't believe people fell for the usage in the preseason when he was out there on every single snap. It's like Sean Payton doesn't care about preseason, okay? He's not the wide receiver 2 on this team. It's a wide receiver 2 by committee. There's Cortland Sutton, and then there's everyone else. Even Evan Ingram was rotating snaps in Week 1. I know he was dealing with an injury, so this is not even just a Mims thing. I don't think beyond Cortland Sutton, you can really trust anybody in fantasy in this passing game because Mims has a nice role, and I want him to kind of stay in that role. But yeah, if you get any points for like return yardage, then he's definitely much more viable in those formats.
All right, Chris, let's get one from Alexander. Says, full PPR, Tyreek or Hollywood? Who you got?
In full PPR, I would say that if all things being equal, if you came out of Thursday night without having any players go and your opponent didn't, I'm going to aim for the ceiling and I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. He did wind up leading the team in both targets and air yards from that standpoint. And also he was featured a bunch out of the slot. And so like I was talking earlier about going up against the Patriots defense, that should have plenty of production from that standpoint. Jacoby Myers, Fitz, beat them over the head from the interior. Around 60% of his snaps played last week out of the slot. So if there's anybody that should be able to take advantage of that matchup, I'm willing to give Tyreek Hill one more shot. I know it's tough looking at how poorly the Dolphins offense played last week, but if anybody can take advantage of it, I think it should be Hill.
We've had several questions, so real quick, Harmon, I'm going to get you on one more. I'll just use this one. The Collector Live says, Penix or Rodgers? I'm asking this because we're getting a lot of Rodgers questions throughout the course of this. So, Penix or Rodgers now that we've seen the Fountain of Youth?
Well, I don't know if we saw the Fountain of Youth or we just saw a pretty undermanned Jets defense there in Week 1. I think I would go with Penix because I was actually encouraged with how much he took off scrambling. Now, they were definitely in kind of hurry-up situations, trying to come back against the Buccaneers. It was a competitive late-game format, but the Penix, like, scrambling a little bit, that's going to help his weekly floor, and I just don't believe any of that is available for Rodgers at this stage of his career.
Keep the questions coming. Keep the comments in. We're going to keep reacting to them throughout the course of the entire show. But coming up next, it's the matchup of the day. It's a Super Bowl rematch, and it's a fantasy feast. We'll take a look at Eagles-Chiefs next on Fantasy Football Live. Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than what we had on Sunday Night Football last week, we get a Super Bowl rematch for the fantasy feast of Sunday afternoon football. We get the Eagles at the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch at Arrowhead. As you see there, the Eagles favored by 1. The over-under on this game, 47. And surprisingly to many, that's a Sunday afternoon kickoff at what will be a rockin' Arrowhead Stadium. So, Chris, give me somebody you like in this fantasy feast.
You have to like Hollywood Brown after seeing him earn a freaking 16 targets just in week 1. And now for folks that might think that his usage was potentially a fluke, let's look at where he was being deployed from. Last season, while we didn't see a ton of production from Hollywood until the playoffs, he was primarily operating as the team's flanker, more on the outside, more of that downfield type of throws from Patrick Mahomes. We're at 12.9 air yards per attempt for Hollywood Brown in 2024. In week 1, all of that stuff shifted. 6.3 air yards per attempt, 52% slot rate. He is essentially operating in the Rashee Rice role, along with having this high-end target rate. 16 targets like we just mentioned. So if now this is going to be the usage for him, we already talked about earlier when we went through the actives and inactives, Xavier Worthy is going to be out. Them going up against the Eagles that we know should be able to put up points against this Chiefs defense, especially seeing how the Chiefs secondary fared against the Chargers passing game. This is going to be a back and forth type matchup. And if Hollywood Brown grades out as Patrick Mahomes' number 1 wide receiver, he should be the guy that we should all be looking for from a fantasy standpoint, not just from the usage, but also contextualizing it to the point where Hollywood is getting a lot of those layup targets that we would love for fantasy purposes.
All right, Harmon, give me something in this game you've got your eye on.
I mean, frankly, I think I kind of disagree with the entire premise of this segment. Like, is this really a fantasy feast? Honestly, with what the Chiefs offense looks right now. I mean, Chris says I have to like Hollywood Brown as the wide receiver 1. No, I don't. You can't make me. You can't make me like that. You can't make me like the fact that Hollywood Brown is getting 16 targets. And even more so, you cannot make me start a Chiefs running back right now, because this run game has been bad for a long stretch of time. So the Chiefs have had 411 running back runs in the regular season and playoffs since the start of the 2024 NFL season. 23 of them have gained 10 plus yards. 4 of the 411 runs have gone for 15 plus yards, and just 2 of them have gone for 20 plus. This is the least explosive ground game in the NFL since the start of last season. And I know that, okay, well, obviously Isaiah Pacheco is not healthy. And then even when he got back last year for the playoffs and late in the regular season, still didn't look like himself. Well, they basically split the running back work truly right down the middle between him and Kareem Hunt. Like, after seeing what Kareem Hunt brought them last year, they thought, yeah, let's get him more in the mix. I just don't love that. So until the usage changes here, and Pacheco, who I thought looked pretty good in isolation in week 1, but until he's getting more work and this run game just looks more explosive, I don't think you can confidently start like either of these guys. So we're really starting to chip away from options here in what we hoped was a more explosive Chiefs offense this season.
Look, I thought the Chiefs were headed back to the Super Bowl this year, and it's only 1 week. Maybe they are. Like, I think it's stupid to bet against the Chiefs over the course of the season. But guys, like, when you start talking about, I think, Harmon, you make a good point about fantasy feast. The feasting here is going to be from the Eagles side of it, because to me, the most concerning thing we saw in week 1 that we didn't really talk enough about was the Chiefs looked bad, and they particularly looked bad on the defensive side of the ball. For the last couple of years, in Spags, we trust, right? This defense has been one step ahead so often. In that game against the Chargers, Harmon pointed out earlier, the Chargers are now a passing team. Well, part of that is also because they were able to pass the ball with ease against this Chiefs defense. Like, the Chiefs defense didn't really take anything away from the Chargers. So now, from a fantasy standpoint, double down on this. Number 1, I'm concerned about ever having to play the Chiefs defense as it stands today. But number 2, I'm taking on an Eagles team that A.J. Brown didn't get the looks he wanted early in the game. You got to feel like that stuff normalizes. They've been talking about it. We've seen it in the past. If A.J. comes out and says something, the next week he gets fed. I don't think the Chiefs right now, the way they played week 1, can stop anybody from getting fed. So maybe, to me, the most significant storyline is that the Chiefs defense didn't play well enough, which means that the Eagles offense is gonna eat. Like, I feel like, from a standpoint, like, there's a very real chance the Chiefs are sitting at 0-2 and everybody's losing their mind. It's all going to be fine for the Chiefs by the end of the year from a real football standpoint, but from a fantasy football standpoint, boys, I just feel like there's been a pretty declarative statement. Lucky for the Chiefs, it was buried on Friday night because we've forgotten about it. The Chiefs defense sucked week 1. So there's just no nice way to say it. Let's take a look at some tough spots, roster decisions that we are struggling with. Matt Harmon, Give me something here that stands out to you that you're looking at as a tough spot.
Yeah, this is so classic for me, right? Because this is about our own teams in this segment. Like Jordan Mason versus Zach Charbonnet here, okay? Because I always do this to myself. I like both of these backfields, but I think I'm just gonna maybe target more of the second guy and hope he takes over it. And then by week 2, it's like, okay, well, which one's really taken over here? You know, like who's really made the progress in this one? For me, guys, Chris, I'm curious if you like agree. I think that Jordan Mason right now is a little bit of the better play just because I think the rushing ecosystem looked better overall, but I'm very like torn between these two guys as kind of like my running back 2-ish on teams where I went heavy wide receiver early.
I agree with that just because I'm maybe having a little bit or taking a bit of copium about Ken Walker's usage, and I'm hoping maybe that shifts. Maybe they start to have a bit more of a committee than they did in week 1. So I'm with you there. I like the Jordan Mason over Aaron Jones in this matchup. I think both will perform well, but if I'm thinking about who between those two is going to bang between the tackles and actually fall into the end zone this week, because remember, Aaron Jones got the receiving touchdown. But if J.J. McCarthy performs like he did in the second half of his week 1 opener, I can see more of Mason being the guy getting those short yardage carries and being the one to produce more from a running back standpoint. So I'm with you there.
All right, Chris, give me somebody that you've got a tough spot on.
All right, look, fellas, I'm gonna take a bit more copium here, and I've got a take about the Ravens game last week. Zay Flowers ruined Mark Andrews' performance. That Zay Flowers is the reason why I didn't get any points, or at least not enough points from Mark Andrews. I mean, Zay Flowers, he had over 140 yards, okay, and that's why I didn't get anything for Mark Andrews. I'm pretty sure all of the folks that have Mark Andrews on their roster, there are dozens of us, I tell you, that are still hoping that Mark Andrews continues to perform from a tight end standpoint. That this is the reason why. Because now look at it. Now, 72% route rate for Mark Andrews, so that's still okay. I mean, still just the one target, but you'd have to think that after last week, they're trying to get him involved a bit more. And now also let's look at their week 2 opponent. The Browns, their secondary, they have been somewhat feisty in terms of we saw how limiting they were for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And let's also look at how did the Bengals wind up moving the ball. It was Noah Fant that got one of the receiving touchdowns. We also saw Mike Gesicki get involved on some of those obvious passing situations. So I'm looking at this where, yes, Charlie Kolar was also on the field for a number of routes. I think around 40-ish% of the route rates. But when both tight ends were on the field, there were actually only just 3 to 4 passes from Lamar Jackson, and those typically went to either Zay Flowers or somebody else. So I'm not as concerned with Kolar being involved in the offense or being out there running routes, but I do see this scenario where Mark Andrews can get involved in this offense just because it's going to be less for Zay Flowers in this week. I think he's still going to be looked at as the team's wide receiver 1, but looking at his matchup, it might be Mark Andrews that should be the more productive of the two, just given their matchup for week 2. So I'm hoping, but I think there's at least a case to be made for Mark Andrews coming back in week 2, but it's tough for folks, and I understand.
All right, so the whole theme of this is tough spots. I'm going to put my fan hat on and my fantasy player hat on. I'm going to ask you, Harmon, a question here, because my tough spot is a simple one. There are a bunch of us that had, like A.J. Brown in our week 1 lineup, got our butts kicked because of it. Or we had, Justin Jefferson in our week 1 lineup, and we got our butts kicked because of it. Or we had, Jamar Chase in our week 1 lineup. But, seriously, Harmon, what the fudge actually happened to week 1 epic wide receivers? Because what I saw was a bunch of non-targets for all, we all thought we were good. We were all sitting there, we're like, I am not in a tough spot. Look, obviously, I'm not going to sit A.J. Brown, and the chat has echoed this a few times. I'm not dumb enough, even me, to sit A.J. Brown this week. But you can't tell me we're not all just a little puckered up after what we saw week 1, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's for A.J. Brown specific. Well, okay, before I talk about A.J. Brown, with the whole wide receiver, week 1 disappointment, I think we go all off season looking back at total stats and yards per route run and first downs per route run. It's like, yeah, these are the guys, right? And we forget that at this position, it is very up and down. Like, obviously week one was extreme, but it always smacks us in the face with a few week one performers where it's just like, yeah, sometimes even the best wide receivers in football can put up like 2 for 50 or 3 for 40 or something like that because the ball goes another way, the matchup is right, or in specifically with the case of AJ Brown. Now, me personally, I don't think he looked 100% in week one. I know AJ's come out and pushed back against that idea and said, oh, it was just all because, you know, they were pushing like soft zones my way, like playing off coverage, and, you know, Jalen was just picking the spots to scramble and pick up positive yards. And like, that's going to happen sometimes. Sometimes your wide receiver one's not going to get a lot of targets going his way because the matchup's not right, or they're just finding other ways to win. I think that was a lot of what happened with AJ Brown. And again, let me give some credit to the guys to play on the defensive side of the football. I think the Cowboys secondary played really well. But to your point, Fitz, for this week, yeah, AJ Brown is going to play a much more press man heavy team. It's going to get up in his face, and that's a much more favorable matchup for what he does specifically as an elite wide receiver.
This is why none of us talk any trash until the games actually are underway, because you just don't know until it gets going. Okay, we're going to bring Justin Boone in. The bat signal is back in the air. We are ready to bring him back. And now we're going to bring him back for some breaking ranks. So Justin's been in there trying to figure out how to best break the ranks. And in order to do that, we're going to see who's an outlier for him. So, Justin, you've been crunching the numbers. You've been doing the math. So give me a name right now that stands out to you that has been breaking the ranks.
Well, I will say, fortunately, this morning, it's not a crazy morning in terms of inactives and everything. One inactive we didn't talk about because he's not a fantasy player is Trent Williams actually being active for the 49ers. I feel a lot better about those 49ers players, even though they don't have Brock Purdy and George Kittle, because Trent Williams, one of their best players on offense, is going to be out there. So we'll look at some guys that I just made some changes on over the last day or two here. The first one, Dak Prescott up to QB 10. You know, it was a very tough matchup in the opener going against the Eagles, right? We knew that was going to be difficult for them, even with George Pickens there. So I think this week it's going to be a lot easier on Dak and that offense. And yeah, the Giants have a pretty good pass rush. So maybe Jake Ferguson's a guy that I wouldn't feel as good about starting. I have him down a little bit lower this week in the tight end 2 ranks, just because I think he might be asked to block a little bit more than usual. But I think the Cowboys are going to be able to throw the ball like they want to. It's going to be a much better game for Dak and those receivers. Next guy here, Kyron Williams. I'm moving him up to RB8. And we did this, right? The second straight year where everybody before the season was like, hey, we're going to see another running back get involved. The Rams talked about, of course, we want to get somebody else involved here. Well, guess what? Week 1 shows up and nobody else was involved. It was the Kyron Williams show. He went out there, played 82% of the snaps. He had 19 touches. He found the end zone like he normally does. He had a great game. Now this week, he gets to go up against the Titans. They got some injuries on their D-line. I know the Rams offensive line dealt with some injuries as well here, but I'm giving the edge here to the Rams offense. Going to be lots of scoring opportunities in that one. They're 5.5-point favorites. So Kyron Williams, a very, very strong play this week. And a guy who is an RB2 normally, but I think could potentially push for RB1 upside this week is Chuba Hubbard on the Panthers. We predicted that Rico Dowdle was going to get involved a little more in this offense, was going to be, used as a pass catcher because Chuba wasn't that efficient on it last year. But guess what? Week 1, he wasn't bad in that area at all, right? He got his touches, 19 touches, had 3 receptions, even scored a receiving touchdown, and now he gets an incredible matchup. He's going up against the Cardinals. He had 165 scrimmage yards against them last year, scored 2 touchdowns in that game. So I want to push Chuba even higher here, but there's so many good running backs in that range that it makes it tough. But like I said, an RB2 with RB1 upside for sure this week.
Okay, so we got a question from Joshua Clark in the chat asking about Dak, who you've moved up to number 10. Burrow or Prescott? Who you got?
Oh, you got to go Burrow there. And he's another one where week 1, we're going to write that off. We know that Zach Taylor, just a terrible situation every single year that they show up unprepared. But now we're in week 2. Hopefully things are settling down. They got a great matchup this week. It's going to be a very high-scoring game with the Jags. So, yeah, we're going Burrow on that one.
All right, keep the questions coming in the chat. We'll keep answering them as we go through. Speaking of which, let's bring everybody together, huddle up, and run some hurry-up offense. You know what we do. We like to put 24 seconds on the clock. We'll put the question up, and we'll let an expert answer it. First question comes from Perm, who says, standard scoring, flex, Javonte Williams, Ricky Pearsall, George Pickens, Ted McMillan, or Jordan Mason. Personally leaning towards Williams currently, unless you can talk me out of it. Starting running back, wide receiver, Saquon, Brown, Flowers, JSN. I think you've taken up enough time. Harmon, try and answer that War and Peace quickly.
Oh my God. I was like, please don't send this one to me. Like, these are all really very good options. I think that I would probably go McMillan just because the volume was so good in week 1. But if you want to go Williams, I'm going to go over time. I don't care. You took up too much time, Fitz. If you want to go Williams, trust your gut. Don't listen to me. These are all great options. Do what you want to do here, buddy.
Look, I'm just running the offense. It's not my fault. Perm wrote a book of a question. Baba Ganoush.
Okay, well, you need to go faster. You need the reps.
All right, Baba Ganoush, PPR, Superflex, Sutton, Mac Jones, Cam Ward. I don't know, Chris Allen, what you think on this question from Baba Ganoush?
PPR, Superflex. I don't want Mac Jones just for the same point that Boone was talking about with Trent Williams potentially being out. I don't like Cam Ward's matchup. I'll go Cortland Sutton for this week, but in future weeks, let's see where Cam Ward is at.
That one, by the way, that delay game's on Harmon. It's Harmon's fault. He didn't let us huddle up quickly. Let's get to the next question. Boone, this one is coming to you. And I mean, F for my draft. I love this, Nancy, being honest. Last place after last week. Joined Guillotine League, and I'm at risk of being eliminated. Think I'll join another Guillotine League because it'll get better, right? If this tells you anything, which quarterback this week? Stroud, Penix Jr., or A-Rod? What do you think, Boone?
A bit of a coin flip between Stroud and Penix Jr. I'm going to go with Stroud there, though, just because the matchup going against that pass funnel Bucs defense, I think they're going to have a better day this week than they had last week against the Rams. So I'm going to go Stroud.
We need Nancy's going full Gruden offense. There's a lot of words in these play calls. Like, it's just a lot of words. We'll get Nigel up next. I think, yeah. I mean, we just got to simplify this. We got to simplify. I think we've got another one coming up here from Nigel. Maybe not. I might be ahead of us on this one. We'll see. All right. In the meantime, we're just going to keep moving on. We're going to go into matchup-proof players. It is time to lock it in. We will lock it in next and figure out who out there is absolutely 100% matchup-proof. We'll do it next on Fantasy Football Live. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. I want to say hello to everybody watching us on YouTube and on yahoosports.tv across all of our networks. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I'm Jason Fitz. He's Matt Harmon, Chris Allen, and Justin Boone. We will be here all the way up to 1 p.m. kickoffs Plus, don't forget our very own Scott Pianowski just settled in. He's got his mug. He's got, like, in my mind, he's got like hot cocoa with little marshmallows on it. He's in a comfy chair that like massages, and he's ready to answer all of your questions on Twitter X. Just use the hashtag AskFFL, and it's never too early for hot cocoa with little toasty marshmallows on it. That's what I say. All right, let's take a look at some of the most talked about players in the Yahoo Fantasy app over the course of the week. Drake London. Alex says this guy's going to cook my Vikings like college students cook gourmet ramen on a plug-in burner in a 10x10 dorm. For real, for real. I just had to read that because that is a perfect description. I don't even care if he's right. That's just a perfect description. Christian McCaffrey. Michael says this guy's about to get 87 rushing yards, 9 catches for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. That would be aggressive, and everybody would love it. And then Doug says about Brock Bowers, I'm just concerned about what he can do, even if he does play at this point. I've got Warren, and I'm getting really tempted to sub him out. You guys can get involved in this conversation. Boone, I know we've talked about this a few times with Brock Bowers, but I mean, if you have the chance to sub in Tyler Warren for Brock Bowers, like as a fan of both of these players, knowing the health issues and knowing that he doesn't play until late Monday night, you kind of have to go with Tyler Warren in that situation, don't you?
If it's the only option you have, yes. But I actually like Chris's suggestion earlier, right? Like, let's go get Michael Mayer and let's sit him on the bench. All the indications right now are that Brock Bowers is going to play. So if you got that bench spot that you could use, you put Mayer there and you wait it out and then you have Bowers, I would actually still play Bowers. I'd give him the slight edge just because we know how high the ceiling is. And Tyler Warren, I love the dude. I really do. But when you put him up against the elite guys, he's just not quite in that conversation yet, but he's pretty close.
Yeah, well, you guys make me feel good. I told all my friends to go get Mayer. I thought I was just being a Raiders homer. 4 catches, 38 yards last week in his limited action. So let's just see. Let's lock it in now. Let's take a look at some matchup-proof players for week 2, and we are going to just simply lock them in. Harmon, give me somebody that you do not give a damn, good sir, about who they're facing. You are locking it in, and you are letting it ride.
Yeah, I'm talking about Ricky Pearsall here, and the matchup isn't so much against the Saints defense, which I do think played well in week 1, but is largely beatable. The matchup is he's playing with Mac Jones as his quarterback. That being said, like, number one, Kyle Shanahan, if you guys remember back to that 2021 NFL draft when they traded up and they took Trey Lance, all the reports were that Kyle Shanahan actually wanted Mac Jones. So he's fulfilling some weird kind of multi-year fantasy here by being able to throw Mac Jones into the lineup. We also know that Mac Jones kind of was the kingmaker for Brian Thomas Jr. last year. I don't know if you guys have heard this. I know the stats got beat over my head constantly in the offseason, but all of Brian Thomas's like best games and best moments came late in his rookie season with Mac Jones. Now, I don't think that's like instructive of anything with Trevor Lawrence or Brian Thomas Jr., anything like that. It's just that Mac Jones is viable enough to get his number one wide receiver the football. And Ricky Pearsall is basically Will Smith alone in the room in the meme, you know, from Fresh Prince. Like, it is him and McCaffrey, and that's it right now. I mean, even Juwan Jennings is going to play in this game, but probably not 100%. So I still think Pearsall is a guy who deserves like 10 targets a game, and he might get it here from Mac Jones, and I think that's good enough to still keep him as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy.
All right, Chris, I'm giving you the keys, and I'm letting you lock it in with somebody. Who you got?
I'm locking it in with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we were talking earlier about some of the wide receiver 1 letdowns from week 1, and ARSB falls into that same category where we did see Jared Goff passing the ball, but it was more towards Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. But let's think about why that happened, because I'm trying to project a different game script for Jared Goff specifically in this matchup against the Bears. Going up against Green Bay in week 1, 43.6% pressure rate for Jared Goff. That was the 3rd best rate of any defense in week 1. Now he gets to face the Chicago Bears, and they're at 25% pressure rate, which was 29th best. So this should project for a scenario where Jared Goff has a little bit more time to operate behind the Detroit Lions passing unit or pass blocking unit, and also be able to throw the ball a bit more farther downfield. In 2024, his average depth of target was 6.3 air yards. He was down to 4.2 in week 1. So that's why we saw more of those short area targets to guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, who was doing his best, Devon Achane cosplay, and also Sam Laporta getting 9 targets as well. So if we see a scenario where Goff has a bit more time to actually get to his backdrop, not have to run for his life with Micah Parsons right behind him, you should see more targets going to a wide receiver like ARSB. So I'm locking it in for Amon-Ra St. Brown in week 2.
Just minutes ago, I gave Justin Boone the opportunity to become the champion, to join me on the hill of the Tyler Warren fan club. He didn't do it. Yet now, according to what I see in front of me, he wants to lock in Tyler Warren. What are we doing, Boone?
I thought you were going to toss it right back to me. It was like the perfect segue to go right into Tyler Warren. Just because he's not on par with those elite guys yet doesn't mean he is not a great fantasy option. After McBride and Bowers, it's like Laporta and Warren are already a conversation for that tight end 3 spot. To come out in his debut as a rookie, 7 catches, 76 yards, 9 targets, also had a carry, and we knew that was going to be part of the thing here, right? He was going to go to Indy. They used him in college. They gave him some carries. He's going to get that kind of usage as well in the pros. We're finally past like this weird thing where the Colts use like 4 tight ends and try to put it all together that way. They finally have a guy who looks like he is going to be either the top target getter or one of the 2 top target getters in that offense for sure. And Michael Pittman, who had a good week last week, now he's got to go up against that Broncos secondary. So Warren is a great play this week.
If only somebody would have told you that on the show last week. God, it's just going to be insufferable anytime I'm right. Okay, at this point, Boone and I get to go work through my childhood drama of the Bills beating the Raiders 51-3 in the AFC Championship game. And we'll let instead Matt and Chris work through fantasy face-off for you.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, thank God we had Jason Fitz to tell us about a tight end that was drafted in the first round. Nobody had ever heard of Tyler Warren before they watched this show in week 1. So
Nobody saw
thank
that
God
one.
we have Jason
You
Fitz.
guys laughed at me.
Thank God. All right, let's talk about Quentin Johnston, a guy that nobody wanted to talk about here for fantasy face-off, but had a monster week 1, 2 touchdowns. Honestly, could have had a third. Maybe he just could have, but you know, that's always the thing with Quentin Johnston is missed opportunities. So let's put him up against some similarly ranked players here for week number 2. Let's talk Jalen Waddle. You mentioned what a mess that Dolphins offense was. Any chance you're taking Jalen Waddle out of the lineup and putting Quentin Johnston in after what we saw in week 1?
I can't do it after week 1. I would still lean towards Quentin Johnston in this matchup. While Jalen Waddle did secure the second on the team in targets, so around a 16-17% share, I would need to see it's essentially a 2-3 leg parlay in order for Waddle to essentially hit, because we need Tua to play well. We need more opportunities for Jalen Waddle, and of course we need to see him capitalize on those, because even from a yards per route run standpoint, Waddle still wasn't making it as a downfield threat for the Dolphins. So even though Quentin Johnston is essentially the team's wide receiver 3 behind Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen, I could still see a scenario where he's able to beat out Fitzy's Raiders on Monday night. So I think I'll give it to Quentin Johnston here.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston had a monster game in Week 18 against those very Raiders. I don't know that we're going to see that necessarily. I actually might go towards Jalen Waddle in this particular matchup. Just maybe I'm being stubborn here. Maybe I'm not adjusting for my priors, but I do think he's still got a pretty good role in this team. Let's go to the next one. We've been talking about the Colts here. Michael Pittman Jr. Are you starting Michael Pittman or are you starting Quentin Johnston in Week 2?
I would still say Quentin Johnston, but this is where I would defer to you on this one, because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of Shane Steichen. While he did deploy Pittman sometimes from the slot, he does have other options. We were talking earlier about Tyler Warren, of course, Josh Downs still kicking around. So if Pittman has to operate on the outside, and I know that Alec Pierce also operates from the perimeter as well, does Michael Pittman get some of Patrick Surtain in this matchup? So with seeing how Calvin Ridley 8 for 27 last year, Alec Iremainor 7 for 13 last year, and of course the Broncos defensive front putting Cam Ward under duress on about 52% of his snaps just this past week, I think that's some of my concern for a guy like Michael Pittman. So I just rather take the security of somebody like Quentin Johnston, even though he might get fewer targets in that passing game. So that's how I'm kind of looking at it. I would say QJ over Pittman, just given the environment, the defensive environment for the Colts.
Well, I'm glad you pointed out that, like, obviously Calvin Ridley struggled dealing with Patrick Surtain, although he also put some balls on the ground in his own right there. Yeah. But, like, I watched Alec Iremainor in week 1, and Riley Moss was – I mean, look, Alec Iremainor's a day 3 rookie, but still, like, Riley Moss played great football in week 1. That was not just a Pat Surtain-based secondary. So I think it's going to be a struggle for both the perimeter wide receivers in Indianapolis today. And Alec Pierce is going to get some Surtain. I think Pittman will get some Surtain. So to me, it's going to have to be Josh Downs plays more. It's going to have to be Tyler Warren. And it would definitely cause me to play Quentin Johnston in a much more favorable matchup in a much pass-heavier environment, too, in Los Angeles over Michael Pittman. Final one here. Khalil Shakir, a little bit more usage in week 1 than maybe I thought coming off a high ankle sprain, but is he a guy that you'd play over Quentin Johnston this week?
I think I would still give a slight edge to QJ here. I'm looking at those two guys as having a similar floor but a lower ceiling for Khalil Shakir. And that's mostly because of the emergence of Keon Coleman. 24.4% target rate for Keon Coleman. Same number of targets as Shakir when Allen was pressured. So in this, looking at their matchup for this week, I'm not saying that having seen the Bills go up against the Ravens defensive front is going to be anything like what they're going to see today. But just given how both receivers are used, if I'm looking for ceiling, I'm going QJ. But if all you're looking for is a floor matchup, I think Khalil Shakir might grade out as the better of those two. But I'm still looking at QJ. I'll give him the slight edge for this week.
I think I would as well. I think the Bills wide receiver usage, passing game usage in general, is going to be a little bit of a moving target. It was Coleman last week. I think Coleman played really well, but this could definitely be a Shakir game where he's getting more usage from the slot. And then we've got Sauce Gardner tracking Coleman around on the outside against this Jets defense. So I don't think Shakir is a bad play. I think he's a better play this week than he was last week, but I still might chase that ceiling with QJ. And again, what I think is just, we got to remember too, the Raiders were also very heavy from a neutral pass rate in week 1. Like you just want to throw in sleepers in those type of game environments when there's going to be a lot of pass attempts. So that's almost a full clean sweep for Quentin Johnston. What could possibly go wrong as we head into week 2 here? Let's bring Fitz and Boone back for a little Make Your Pick.
All right, make your pick, Boone. It's time. We'll throw up some questions, and I'll have you figure out what they should do and how they should get through it. We'll start with Jet Life. I can read. Says, I have 2 flex spots. Pick 2 PPR. Boutte, Tet, Pearsall, Olave, and ETN. What do you got? Let's pick 2 of these.
We're going Boutte. We saw what he did last week. We know how much everybody at Yahoo loves Boutte. Definitely going with him after that debut. And then Travis Etienne. We have to follow this. We wondered all offseason, who was it going to be in that backfield? Well, guess what? He's the guy right now. And as much as we all love Faceoff potentially as a long-term play, a guy that could carve out a bigger role, and if something happens, maybe get in that lead spot and take off with it. But right now, you have to like him as a very strong RB2 with RB1 upside.
Yeah, you're right. The Boutte love is staggering from everybody across the board. Let's go next to Phil Fort 13, who says, 2 flex players needed, half-point PPR. Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Calvin Ridley. Thanks for the information you're producing each week. Thanks for watching, Phil 413. We appreciate you. So what do you think on this one?
Making it very, very tough on me here. Jordan Mason, absolutely. Loved what we saw last week. He had the edge in that 50-50 committee. And there's going to be weeks where he's the one finding the end zone, not Aaron Jones catching a pass for a touchdown. So Jordan Mason is a great play this week. As I have him ranked as an RB2, I think I'm higher than most on him. Then it becomes a question, which Seahawks back do you roll with? After what we saw in week 1, I'm actually going Zach Charbonnet over Kenneth Walker. Now, I'm hedging a bit in my rankings because I have them side by side right now, but I'm going with Charbonnet. I don't know that Walker is completely healthy. They're easing him back in, and right now Charbonnet looks like the better back in that offense, so I'm playing him, but they're both a little riskier than I think we expected before the season.
Yeah, one of the bigger surprises, I think, was watching that running back split in week 1. And you're right. Every single year, it feels like Kenneth Walker III just isn't quite healthy. Let's get one more in. Aaron says, half PPR, Marvin Harrison Jr., T. Higgins, Emeka Boutte, and Tet McMillan. Got 2 spots to fill between these 4. So we'll pull them up and see what you want. Again, it's half PPR for clarity. What do you got?
I will say I don't think there's a bad pick in the bunch here, but we're going to go with the guys that I think have higher upside this week, and that's T. Higgins in a bounce-back spot after a quiet week 1 going up against the Jags, and then Marvin Harrison Jr., a very strong week 1 from him. We were hoping that he was going to be able to make a bit of a leap going into his second season. From what we saw in week 1, it's definitely on the table, so I'm playing him this week.
All right, from that to Sunday Night Football, we got a big one coming up on Sunday night. The Falcons taking on the Vikings. Sneaky potential for Penix? We'll break it down next on Fantasy Football Live. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. Sunday night matchup this week has a bunch of consequences. It's a Kirk Cousins Bowl, which in its face sounds about as exciting as an LL Bean catalog. But, great that the Falcons taking on the Vikings tonight. Or Sunday. Yeah, that's tonight. 3.5-point favorite for the Vikings. I'll figure this out. Over and under on this one, 45. Let's take a look at it from a fantasy perspective. Matt Harmon, what do you think the biggest part of this game is for you?
Yeah, to me, it's Drake London, who had a shoulder injury in week 1, is going to play in this game, mostly practiced throughout the course of the week. The usage for him was absolutely, monstrous in week 1. 35.7% of the targets, even though he did get banged up late in this game. 13.5 targets per game with Michael Penix. And in the 4 games that Michael Penix has started, he has just fed the football to Drake London. It was like Drake London and Malik Neighbors at the top of the expected fantasy points leaderboards from week 1. I know the people out there saying, hey, buddy, we don't score on expected fantasy points in my league. I get it. But what this means is it is coming for Drake London. Darnell Mooney's going to play in this game. I'm interested to see how much he gets used and whether Penix can connect with him. But like a few more of those passes, those targets hit from week 1, especially the 2 in the end zone that Drake London had. He just secures one of those. We're having a very different conversation about his play from week 1. So it is a tough secondary matchup against Minnesota Vikings. They make things confusing, but typically against those zone coverage looks, you're funneling the ball over the middle of the field to the interior receiver. That is going to be Drake London. I'm expecting big things once again for him here in week 2.
Boone, what do you have as a standout storyline for you?
I want to know, is Michael Penix Jr. a sneaky fantasy starter moving forward? Because we saw something a little more from him in week 1, right? He actually rushed the ball, and I totally viewed him as a pocket passer. I didn't think that was going to be part of his game at all. But 6 scrambles for 21 yards and a rushing touchdown, on top of the fact that he went against that Bucs defense, threw for 298 yards and a touchdown through the air. I think that puts him on the map and on the radar now as a guy that you might be able to get in your lineup in good matchups. Now, this is going to be another test for him. This is not the pass funnel Bucs defense. This is Brian Flores' Vikings defense. So we'll see how he acquits himself. But having Mooney back, having London out there, when last week at this time, we weren't sure if either of those guys are going to be able to play, seeing Kyle Pitts actually look pretty decent in the opener. I know we don't want to jump back on that train, but Kyle Pitts looked like he might be the best version of himself that we've seen in a little while. And then, of course, Bijan Robinson, who's going to catch a ton of passes and do a ton of work on his own. So I think Penix Jr. is now in that conversation as a fringe low-end QB1, high-end QB2, and a guy that you could potentially plug in your lineup.
Yeah, a big week 2 for him will start a loud conversation. I'll look at this from the standpoint of just being honest with everybody. I think the running back situation for the Vikings is dumbfounding right now. We're only 1 week in, and I have no idea what to make of it. Jordan Macy got 15 carries to Aaron Jones 8 in week 1. Is that the standard moving forward? But Aaron Jones had 3 catches. I can't imagine that's really part of how we build any sort of fantasy value for Aaron Jones moving forward, though, because it felt like a quiet day from Justin Jefferson, and they essentially didn't have a wide receiver too. That's not going to be the norm week in and week out. So every single week, Boone mentioned earlier, who's going to get the touchdowns. Right now, I just don't know. Did what we see last week, is that the way that this room is going to run, or was that just an outlier? Is this truly going to be whichever back is hot? And if that's the case, that gets even more nerve-wracking for everybody that's playing fantasy football. So every single week is an extra data point in how the Vikings are going to handle their running back position moving forward. That's the part I think that I have the most eyeballs on. Chris, what do you got as a storyline for you in this?
So for this one, will the real JJ McCarthy please stand up? Because we didn't know which JJ McCarthy we were going to get after this game. Because in the first half, it was a tale of 2 halves for the Vikings QB1. We saw more of a skittish, let's scramble a bit more. And even when he passed the ball, it was more of the check down type variety for JJ McCarthy, even when he did pass. Just 48 passing yards after the Vikings went into halftime. But then afterwards, he did see less pressure against the Chicago Bears, but his success rate climbed, his average depth of target doubled. We even saw a design rushing attempt for JJ McCarthy, and that's how he wound up getting into the end zone. So Fitz, to your point, not really seeing a wide receiver 2 for the Vikings passing game. That's also something to kind of look forward, try and see if that role susses out here in week 2. But I'm really looking to see how does JJ McCarthy approach this week 2 matchup against the Falcons. I mean, their defensive front is not really one that I'm too terribly concerned about. So do we see him be able to operate this pass game a bit more with more time to work with Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, and the rest of the bunch? So I'm hopeful, but then also to Boone's point, if we do see more efficiency from him, does JJ McCarthy also slide into that sneaky group of quarterback streamers that we can start to rely on from a week-to-week basis? So Michael Penix is already firmly in that category, but can JJ McCarthy get into it? I think we'll find out after today.
All right, let's take a look now at Primetime Picks. We are 1 week in. That's right, 1 week in, and that means we only have one result. But that result, it was a close one. Ugh. Look at the final scores there. Justin Boone ekes out. Boone gets by less than 2 points, comes in and gets the week 1 victory. Now remember, we're not counting the points over the course of the season. That is simply the tiebreaker. We are counting the weeks 1. So Justin Boone gets the early advantage. You guys know how this goes. It's a standard snake draft, and this week our 3 games would be the Vikings-Falcons game we just mentioned, Tampa Bay-Houston, and then the Chargers and the Raiders. So we got a Monday night doubleheader and a Sunday night game here. We will go in the order of the current standings, which means, Chris, you are up first. 18 points last week, buddy. The goal is to score points. Okay, just letting you know it's not like golf, but this is week 2. It's week 2. Come on now. So go ahead. You got first crack at this thing.
Now, that's Mark Andrews' fault, okay? And we already talked about it earlier. I'm going to let it go. We're on to week 2, like Bill Belichick says. We're on to the next week. So I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson straight up. I know there was something of a split between him and Tyler Algier, but his work in the receiving game, I'm on that for week 2. So let's go with Bijan Robinson to kick things off.
This is the rare put my money where my mouth is, because I came into the season saying Ashton Jeanty had a chance to be RB1 for the whole year. And then he wasn't all that impressive week 1. Not his fault. I mean, there was just absolutely nothing in front of him. And now the Raiders are going to be without one of their starting offensive linemen in Jackson Powers Johnson, which is an abject disaster. But you know what? I'm wearing the shirt. I got the helmet behind me. Screw it. It's early in the year. Ashton Jeanty with the 2nd overall pick. I'm going complete homer. It's early in the season. Ashton Jeanty will save me in week 2. And I already feel like I'm going to regret that one. Matt Harmon, what do you got, boys?
Yeah, Fitzy really sold that pick, buddy. He really believed in that one there. This one is a tough choice. We've got 2 great wide receivers that I'm choosing between. But like I said earlier, Drake London, man, got all that massive usage in week 1. I know it's a tougher secondary matchup, but I just see him getting 10, 12 targets off the bus. Give me Drake London here at the 3rd pick.
That Drake London before Justin Jefferson. Shocking. That's where we are. Boone, you're up next. What do you got for us?
Well, I want to say, I don't want to celebrate a week 1 victory, but Harmon's confidence last week in our chat, it really made that win feel pretty good. And it feels pretty good to take 2 high-end receivers before Harmon's going to get a chance to get them after the turn here. I'm going to go Justin Jefferson first. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Jason, like, it was a bad week for him in week 1, and he still had 44 yards and a touchdown, still finished as a top 20 receiver. How can you go wrong with him? And then Nico Collins, it was even worse for Nico Collins. And yet I'm pretty confident in that matchup with the Bucs. He is going to bounce back and have a good game, and they're going to go out of their way to make sure he is getting a ton of targets based on the way the coaching staff was talking.
Look at it. Justin Boone getting a little bit. I mean, Boone's back here getting a little saucy. You can feel it. Harmon. You're up next. What do you got?
Yeah, I have a feeling that my next pick is going to end up being a wide receiver just based on the players on the board. So I do want one running back here, and I will go with Bucky Irving on Monday Night Football. The Bucs run game didn't quite look as potent as it was last year. They're doing some shuffling along the offensive line that I'm a little skeptical of, but Bucky is still a sick player. He had one play against the Falcons where he literally looked like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, like making a guy miss. So, yeah, give me Bucky Irving here. I feel pretty confident he's going to have a big night on Monday.
Matt Harmon, fraud. All right, you know why you're a fraud? Because I'm now taking Emeka Buka. Because I've been listening to you. Emeka Buka. If I had a shot for every time somebody in fantasy football said the word Emeka Buka, I'd be in rehab right now. So all I'm doing is listening to the very experts that I'm sitting here with, taking Emeka Buka, and I'm sitting back here saying that one was easy. Chris, what do you got for us next? You got 2.
Well, Fitzy, if you're going to do the Matt Harmon impression, you got to do the bit with, all right, guys, so if we're going to have a guy going against man press coverage here and like the yards per route run and all that, like you got to do the voice right if you're going to try and do
That was pretty good.
Again, okay.
I knocked my mic over.
That was pretty on point. Yeah.
It's all fun and
right,
games
so
until he uses that voice to mock you, which he's done to me at least once. So yeah,
it's coming. It'll probably happen later tonight. I'll go with Mike Evans here. I do have some concerns with Tristan Wirfs being out for this game, that him having Baker Mayfield go up against this Houston defensive line is going to be something of an issue. But seeing Mike Evans get 8 targets, almost 26% of the target rate for Mike Evans, I should see him be able to have a decent outing for this one. And then I'll take a running back to close things out, because after going wide receivers and tight ends for last week, didn't work out all that well for me. So let's try Omari Hampton here for the Chargers. I mean, almost 100% of the team's carries for last week. I mean, the Chargers offensive line, I mean, one of the fewest average yards before contact. But Fitzy, your Raiders allowed one of the most last year in terms of average yards before contact. So I would say that Hampton at least has a little bit more of a runway this week, and we should see a bit more from him in the box score.
Yeah, I'm petrified of what this matchup's going to look like Monday night, so I don't blame you at all. All right, I'm back on the clock, and I'm just going to go back to, I was listening early in the show, and Boone mentioned the name Kyle Pitts and said, hey, Kyle Pitts actually looked like he could be the Kyle Pitts of old. I'm banking on that. I'm banking that Kyle Pitts wasn't just a one-week aberration, and that there is something special that's starting to build there finally for a player we all know has it in him. Plus, there's not a lot left on the board that I can actually select. So I just take Kyle Pitts here, and I send it back to Matt. Feel free to give us the voice. America wants it, Matt.
Yeah, I'll pass on that and just say that I can't believe you tried to dunk on me on the last round, and then you come back and take Kyle Pitts. So real cool draft you're having there, Fitz. You got Trent Richardson 2.0. You have a great pick in Emeka Egbuka, and then you have Kyle Pitts. Awesome lineup you got there. I will go with Ladd McConkey, the wide receiver 1 on a team that I was hyping up earlier. Again, I do put my money where my mouth is here, and Ladd McConkey is certainly a player who, again, can demand the targets of that great pass first Chargers offense. I mean, smash pick for. I mean, what is he still doing against the worst secondary in the league? I mean, he's still available here. What are we doing, boys? Come on, let's get serious.
Worst secondary in the league. That's a bold statement. I mean, Drake May didn't carve him out. Okay, but Boone, what do you say? Save me from this argument, Boone. What do you got?
It leaves me with a very tough choice here. I normally would say Brock Bowers, but because of the injury, we're not sure exactly how healthy he's going to be. I'm going to go with his teammate, Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers coming off a huge game in the opener, 97 yards. The last time he played the Raiders, 9 catches, 123 yards. Played the Chargers, 9 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown. I'm expecting a big game from him here with Brock Bowers just not being quite 100%.
Yeah, and by the way, he barely had a professional quarterback for that game. Let's see. I'm just holding out hope. Holding out some hope. All right, those are your picks. If there's anything I can be sure of, we will trash talk each other, and then we'll bring it back to you next Sunday, and we'll let you know just exactly how poorly it went, especially if it went poorly for Harmon. That I can guarantee you. All right, let's get to hurry up offense. We'll bring everybody together. We'll put 24 seconds on the clock, and we'll see what we can answer for everybody. Big Island Surfer said Yahoo Fantasy. T. Higgins, Priesthall, or Gabuka for flex. Starters are Neighbors and Brian Thomas, wide receiver. Barkley and HN at running back. Also have Javonte Williams on the bench. What do you think, Pat?
I think that this is a good week to Oh, man, really good options. All very good options here, Big Island Surfer. So if you've got a feeling on it, go with your gut. But I think this is a good week to chase the T. Higgins bounce back. I think the Jags get thrown all over by the Cincinnati Bengals here, so that's where I'd go.
I thought you were gonna like cowardly run away from that. I'm proud you made a pick. First you were like, whatever you feel like is fine. It's like asking what you want for dinner. Let's go next to BB. Comes in, says Fields or Burrow, PPR flex, Tillman, Shakur, Tracy Jr. What do you think, Chris?
I'll go Fields just for the upside from a rushing standpoint, because if anything, then the Konami code is still alive and well in 2025. 12 carries last week against the Steelers. I know it might be a slightly tougher out with the divisional matchup, but still, I'll take Fields here, even though I'm still expecting big things from my man, number 9 under center for the Cincinnati Bengals. But let's go Fields.
All right, let's bring up the next question. We had a little time to spare there. And the next one comes from Aaron, who says, should I drop Ferguson for Jawan Johnson? I also have Kelsey. What do you think, Boone?
Yeah, I'm not that big of a Jake Ferguson guy. I think them bringing in George Pickens really hurts him. Like I said, this week, I don't necessarily think he has the best outlook, and I will chase that Juwan Johnson, target share from week 1. It was massive, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to put that up against the 49ers defense, but yes, I would make that move.
All right, let's go next to Nigel. Nigel I think Nigel is specifically asking Boone this question, so Boone gets 2 in a row. Nigel wants to know Henderson or Travis Hunter PPR. That is from the YouTube chat. Nigel wants Henderson or Travis Hunter PPR specifically to Boone.
I love them both. It's like picking between kids, but I'm going to go with Henderson this week. I really love the matchup. That Dolphins defense, we don't even need to talk about it much more. They are terrible. Henderson is going to have a breakout game this week.
By the way, I mean, there's no doubt I was a better kid than my brother. My mom should have had a favorite. It should have been me. I mean, I think we should normalize just establishing favorites. We all know one of us is better. Maria Chavez also asks in the YouTube chat, Hill or McMillan, Diggs or Jay Williams, half PPR flex. I will go to Harmon with that. Hill or McMillan, Diggs or Javonte Williams, half PPR flex.
I would go with Javonte Williams over Diggs. You're chasing the touchdown there. The Cowboys' offensive line was pretty awesome in week 1, although obviously they didn't have Jalen Carter. The wide receiver one is a little more difficult between Hill or McMillan. I think I'm going to go with Tedder or McMillan there. I'm just skeptical of all the Hill stuff.
All right, from Sunday football to Monday night, we've got a Monday night doubleheader, which is going to absolutely impact all of us from a fantasy football perspective. We'll figure out if Emeka Egbuka is set for an encore on Monday night next. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live. We are taking you all the way up to 1 p.m. as we get ready for all the action happening today on a Stacked Sunday. But we also have a Monday Night Football doubleheader. We can all agree that these are the absolute worst. I'm just saying it out loud because one game is way past my bedtime. But let's take a look at these two games. The first game's Bucks at Texans. You see it there. The Texans a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under on at 42.5. This game starts at a nearly normal time of 7 p.m. Eastern. Give me one storyline here, Matt, that you've got your eye on in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you already made fun of me for this, so I hate that we've got to talk up Emeka Egbuka one more time, but we learned something really important from him in week number 1, and that is that he can absolutely win outside. Look, number 1, I think this is like kind of an over-discussed storyline with some of these offenses at this point, especially this offense in Tampa Bay. They kind of blur the lines between what is and is not a slot receiver based on the condensed formations, how much motion they're doing. But again, based on pre-snap alignment, Emeka Egbuka caught 3 of his 4 targets when he was lined up outside for 58 yards, and both of his touchdowns on these big post routes. And I don't know how many times we have to learn this lesson as like a prospecting community. Just because a guy is used as a slot player in college does not mean that's all he can do. I'm not saying that Emeka Egbuka is going to be the next Justin Jefferson, but we saw that with Jefferson obviously coming out of LSU, and then even with his former Ohio State alum, Jackson Smith-Njigba, now winning outside. So it's just like another good signal for a guy who I think is on his way to having a great rookie season in Tampa Bay.
Chris, what do you have your eyes in this one?
I'm not going to have my eyes on it. I'm going to be lifting up CJ Stroud in prayer throughout this game, because can we get this man some protection at some point? I get the fact that the Texans wanted to try and throw as many assets as possible at allowing Stroud to stay upright. Yes, they let Laramie Tunsil go. I mean, they do the trade and get some picks and bring in Laken Tomlinson, Tyus Howard, and they draft one of their offensive linemen in the second round. But we're still seeing Stroud getting battered behind that offensive line. Last season, 37.9 or 41.2% rather, pressure rate around 38% in week 1. His number of times he was hit last season, average 7 per game, 6.47 on just this past week. And the man is getting hit. We're not able to really see him connect with Nico Collins. So that's the thing that fantasy managers should really be upset about, because if you sunk an early round draft pick into Nico Collins, this is the reason why you're not seeing as much production for your early round wide receiver. So let's hope in this game, even though it's going to be tough going against that Rams defensive front, let's hope that Stroud at least gets a bit more time to operate behind that offensive line, because things aren't looking great, fellas. So that's the thing that I'm looking for in week 2.
Okay, so Frankie J came in and asked us, and I'm Chris. We'll see what you think. He says, need your help. Projected to go 0-2 Dynasty League. Which quarterback to start? Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, Geno Smith.
I would toss out Stroud from that group almost immediately, because at least for Trevor Lawrence, he does have a projected high-scoring matchup between my Bengals. Their pressure rate, yes, Trey Henderson did have some success there, but at least from a secondary standpoint, the Bengals still have plenty of work to do. So I would say either Trevor Lawrence or your guy Geno Smith would be my preference. I would say between those two guys, I would lean Lawrence just for the projected matchup over Geno Smith, but it's close.
All right, speaking of that matchup, let's look at the other Monday Night Football game. It's a late one. Chargers at Raiders, 10 p.m. Eastern in Vegas. The kickoff for that one. The Chargers favored by 3.5. The over-under on at 46.5. And, you know, for me, guys, this all comes down to what the offensive line can do in front of Ashton Jeanty. We saw the numbers. They were abysmal. 19 carries, 38 yards. Not much there to run. I think the most disturbing part of that was after the first drive, once the Raiders sort of showed what they were going to do, they just couldn't create any lanes. Now, Pete Carroll made it clear that he thinks Ashton Jeanty was too amped and needs to be a more patient runner. But no matter what the system looks like for Monday night, they have got to find a better way to get the ball into Ashton Jeanty's hands. That's just fact. They were taking on a Patriots team that I don't think is really all that great. They were able to get away with the fact that they couldn't run the football, but if that becomes a continual problem in this offense, nobody will respect play action. Without play action, Geno Smith going to get murdered. So can that offensive line actually help Ashton Jeanty get caught? He's got to get some time before he actually gets smashed. Otherwise, they don't stand a chance in this one. Boone, what stands out to you?
I mean, you're doing your best to try to make this a Raiders show. I'll switch it to the other side, and I'll talk about the Chargers a little bit. And Harmon mentioned it off the top, right? This is a passing team now. So I want to know, can Justin Herbert actually join the elite quarterbacks? Because people forget, in 2021, back in the day when he had a younger Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and some better weapons, he was the QB2 in fantasy points per game behind only Josh Allen. He showed that upside already. What we saw in week 1 is a guy that I think could definitely do that again. This is a good matchup for him. Now the weapons are getting back to a place where they're pretty solid and there's a lot of depth there. So he's kind of insulated. An injury or two is not going to crush this offense. And if he's going to run the way he did in week 1 and the way he did for part of last season, this is a guy that could get up into the top 5 and maybe potentially compete with some of those elite fantasy quarterbacks. So I think after this game, people are going to be talking about how Justin Herbert is maybe the best quarterback value in drafts this year. He's a fantastic guy to have on your team right now.
Raiders by 70. All right, Matt, Boone, you guys take it over. It's time for Enough Already. Yell about some things.
Yeah, this is the segment where we get to maybe exercise some demons, get some things off of our chest, things that we've just seen way too much, just enough already with some of this stuff. For me, I'll start it off here, Boone. Caleb Williams, over analysis. Enough already. I forget this every single year until we get into the regular season, that some quarterbacks are just way too micro-analyzed, hyper-fixated, and honestly, it's just not even worth tweeting about them, and especially Caleb Williams, because I made the mistake of wading into the Caleb Williams water on Tuesday morning, putting some clips up, being hey, he's got to rip some of these throws that he just didn't take in week 1, and people are yeah, because he sucks, he's inaccurate. It's just whoa. We're allowed to say that he definitely checked down maybe a little bit too much in week 1. Maybe was pushing the ball to the flats a little bit too often. But also, Ben Johnston has talked about wanting him to get to completions, which he did successfully in week 1. It wasn't a perfect game, but it wasn't the worst quarterback game we've ever seen. An absolute joke, an absolute embarrassment. I mean, frankly, for 85% of that game, he was the better quarterback on Monday night than the guy who is currently the NFC Player of the Week in JJ McCarthy. No disrespect to what McCarthy did. That was an awesome showing to win that football game. So for me, it's just Boone, we said all offseason, it's going to take a little time for Caleb Williams to integrate into the Ben Johnson offense, to get all these weapons up to speed. And I feel like that's exactly what we saw in week 1. So enough already with the over-analyzation of Caleb Williams. Let's give it some time here.
Yeah, I would like to see people at least be even about it, right? Why aren't we talking more about Bo Nix having a terrible first week? Why is it just always varying?
Island game bias, baby.
Totally on board with you, though. And I think people just have certain feelings about him and his personality and, little arrogance, little immaturity. But I think he's going to figure it out. Let's give him some time for sure.
All right, give me your thing you want to say enough already here, too.
Well, it's funny because you and I are part of the problem. We talked about this storyline all offseason, and on this show, no shots at Chris. Chris talked about it already. I mentioned it briefly when I was talking about Travion Henderson this week. I am so sick of hearing about the Dolphins drama, the Dolphins poor play. This team is not good. And you talked me off the ledge in the panic meter on Monday because I wanted to just put them all the way to the end. Let's not even talk about this team anymore. We're going to give them one more week, but I will not be surprised if on Monday we are putting them in the total panic, complete panic, whatever the furthest one is. They are going all the way that way. It's just a brutal situation. No one's coming to save them. Mike McDaniel doesn't seem to have any more cards to play. Tyreek Hill with the antics, with the off-field problems. Everything is going south here and not in a good way. And Devon Achane, I feel bad for him because he's the only guy in fantasy that continues to produce. But with these injuries on the offensive line, with Tua's durability concerns, is Tua going to end up going down? And if he does, then what happens to Achane? Because last year we saw the splits. When Tua's not out there, Achane was almost unusable in fantasy. So this is a rough situation and one that I am just so sick of talking about. And I hope we don't have to spend any more time on it. Let's put that one to bed. The Dolphins are not good this year.
Tough break, buddy. It's only week 2. We got a long way to go, and I think we're going to end up talking about the Dolphins a little more. But I'm so with you. That is very much an enough already team. All right, let's throw it back to Fitz and Chris for a little bring the props.
All right, let's bring in the noise, bring in the funk, and most importantly, bring in the props with prop bets we like this week. Chris, give me something to stand out to you.
I mean, I already talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown earlier in our Lock It Up segment. So, of course, I had to put my money where my mouth is and say Amon-Ra St. Brown over 5.5 receptions. We talked about the fact that going up against this Bears defensive front, not going to see as much pressure. At least that's the projection, or at least that's the hope that we're going to see for Jared Goff in this offense for today. So that should give him more time to get the passes out to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And also, the Bears allowed the 9th most receiving yards to interior receivers in week 1. So it sets up well for an Amon-Ra to get right back into the wide receiver 1 saddle. So I'm taking him his prop of over 5.5 receptions for week 2.
I really love Amari and Hampton over 54.5 rushing yards. Feels like that number is pretty low for somebody that's going to keep getting more and more workload. I think you guys have done a really nice job of talking about why the Chargers are a passing team, but I also think that as defenses try to adjust to that, it's going to create better running opportunities for the Chargers, including this week. Omari and Hampton busts off a couple of big runs, hits that over 54.5 pretty easily. Chris, what's one more for you that you like?
We also talked about A.J. Brown earlier. His target shares coming off of some of those less than 20% target rate games. I mean, he's seen 25, 30, plus 30% targets in those types of games. So while I do share some of Harmon's similar concern about how slow he looked at week one, this was also against a defense that Matt Eberflus called not a single snap of man coverage, according to Fantasy Points. So hopefully against this in this game against the Chiefs, we do see some of those better zone coverage looks for A.J. Brown. See him fall into the end zone a couple of times as well. So I'm taking his over of 73.5 receiving yards for this game. Both he and Devonta Smith should be smash plays for week 2.
All right, let's bring everybody back together like the Eagles reunited. Hell is frozen over. We're all back together for hurry up offense. Okay, here we go. We put the question up on the board. We'll go to Harmon first. And the first question comes from Joel. And Joel says, hi, guys. Need a flex option for one of my Yahoo leagues. Got Hollywood Brown versus Philly, Jerry Jeudy at Baltimore, Travis Hunter at Cincy. Start one, bench two, please, and thank you. What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, Judy's the obvious bench here to me. I know that Hollywood Brown got all that usage, but it's a really good secondary that he's going against. So I will take the risk with Travis Hunter here against a very beatable Cincinnati Bengals defense. I think that's your high upside play, Joel.
All right, the next question comes from Sand Landback. Sam says, ETN, Keon Coleman, or Olave. What do you think, Chris?
I'll go ETN there. Again, while I did see some hope for the Bengals rush defense in week one, they also were susceptible to passes to running backs. That's what we saw Dylan Sampson get in for like 8 to 10 targets this past week. So ETN being the clear RB1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I can see another high-end performance from this week. I'm not saying 100-plus yards, but at the very least, decent enough production from fantasy.
Next up comes from Zoli, and Zoli says, need 3 wide receivers, Coleman, Pearsall, Pickens, Neighbors. Boom, what you got?
Well, this is just cruel. They're just picking one that's going to make me say to sit Keon Coleman, which is what you have to do here. Neighbors is in his own stratosphere in that group. Pickens already talked about why we would like him as a bounce back this week in an easier matchup. And then Ricky Pearsall, we had a joke kind of before week one that we had put Ricky Pearsall up in like a graphic before a show. And I had said the only way that's going to happen is if everyone else gets hurt. And everybody else did get hurt in San Francisco. So Ricky Pearsall as well.
All right, PG with the next question. The next one comes from PG. He says, Denver D or Buffalo D, Charbonnet or Chubb flex? Harmon, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I know Fitzy took his big victory lap on the Colts offense out of week one. I liked what I saw too, but going against the Dolphins defense versus the Broncos defense, totally different ball game. So I'd like the Denver defense to make Daniel Jones pay for a few risks in this game. And then I don't feel great about either Charbonnet or Chubb. I'll go slight lean to Charbonnet here.
When the Colts are 2-0, I'm going to be insufferable. Tyler, the next one, Mike Evans or Devontae Smith? Also, Juwan Johnson or Ingram is the question. So I'll go back and reread this one to Chris. It's Mike Evans or Devonta Smith? Also, Juwan Johnson or Ingram?
I'll go Devonta Smith out of the two of those. His target shares with Dallas Goedert out of somewhere around like 24-25%. So I like that. And then what was it? Juwan Johnson and Evan Ingram. I'll go Juwan Johnson there. We'll see if the same target rate persists for week 2, but I think between the two, I like Juwan Johnson.
Boone, let's get another one in from Somdeep. Says PPR flex, Pearsall, DJ Moore, Hollywood Brown, Jaylen Warren, please help. Again, Pearsall, DJ Moore, Hollywood Brown, Jaylen Warren, please help.
Nice and easy, real quick. We are going Pearsall there. Last man standing in that receiving core.
Look at that. All with time to spare. We are here every single Sunday getting you caught up and ready for all the action that you need starting at 11:30 a.m. Eastern to help you get your lineup set. We're also here all week. You can wake up with Yahoo Sports Daily and catch the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast live on Yahoo Fantasy YouTube. It's everywhere. Spend every waking hour with us. Yeah, 24 hours a day on the Yahoo Sports Network. If you haven't found it on your TV services yet, you can just type in yahoosports.tv and get there. Good luck in your fantasy matchups. I know that we all need luck in ours. We will be talking endless trash, but most importantly, we will be back with you next week. On behalf of everybody who works their tails off behind the scenes, thank you so much for watching. See you next Sunday.